Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Wolfram Language Design Review, one of the very last in our 14.3 series, I believe. This is about Tabular again. All right.
Okay, I can explain this one. So we are adding a new type for geoposition objects, and it admits those two syntaxes.
Okay.
And so you see there in the example, in the tabular column, how we have the type of the coordinates inside the list vector, reals2, and it can be reals3 or reals4. It supports general datums, missings. Tabular column is fantastic for missing support.
I see. So it's pretty obscure by the time this is I mean, I understand why we're doing this. I don't know whether there's any way in which we can have something that's more interpretable for users here. I mean,
Yes, that particular case is a bit complicated because the time stamps are stored as absolute times with a precision mark, and that makes them real expression rather than real 64 machine numbers.
is that very inefficient?
That, I mean, having times makes the thing more inefficient, yes, but I mean, because it's absolute times,
It, it's rare that they have the times.
Yeah, I understand.
yes,
Unless we're doing satellites, which we will be doing more of.
Right.
right. So the
Um,
previous cases with elevation and just lat long are reals, machine
yeah,
reals.
okay. What about plane airplanes? Don't they have, I mean, when we have the trajectory objects, will they be represented in these kinds of ways?
Well, that's the future geotrajectory object. And I don't know how we'll represent internally the data. Certainly, we'll have to interact with tabular column, and tabular column will be able to extract the geopositions. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just wondering whether I don't know in the type system for tabular, uh, to what extent do we have struct-like types? I mean, in the compiler, right, we have um, type unions, do we not? No, that type union is slightly different. I mean, I'm talking about a struct. What do we call a struct in compiler types?
Type products.
Okay.
I mean, the type sum is the union type. Um, yes, and we basically so the way instead of having a general type of struct, I I I introduced this way of registering types, which is what Jose has used here to do the geoposition.
Okay. But so the point that I'm making is this thing should be a struct, not a real expression for. Should it not? Because the first two elements are just reals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what could be, I mean, yeah, and the close, I mean, so in some sense that could be list tuple,
Right.
real 64, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And that's actually, I mean, it could be done that way, Jose.
Okay, so whatever's more
Mhm.
efficient is the way it should be done. So you
Yeah.
guys should figure that out. I mean, this is going to be okay for right now, but when we get more trajectory type stuff, I think we're going to care more about the efficiency of this particular thing.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I like the idea of having this being listable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is about typesetting, and and you have an older version, apparently. Um, so we are typesetting the geoposition column as you see there with degrees, minutes, seconds. But in today's build, these things align much better and don't show as many digits. We just leave it as
Why are we going full Babylonian here? I mean, why aren't we using decimal degrees?
we could do that. It's one of the things we wanted to discuss. So what I was proposing in today's build is an intermediate case in which we have degrees and then minutes with a decimal.
I would have just used decimal degrees. I mean, isn't that how most things are being stated? I mean, if I say, here or something, I'm going to get
Yes.
decimal degrees.
Yes, that's true. But I mean, if you do DMS string of that, we get something that is sometimes easier to read.
Do we care? I mean, I just think this looks, full Babylonian, so to speak. I mean, I think what we mostly, okay, when people, okay, does anybody use these things really in modern times? I mean, if I don't know of a, you
Yes,
know,
I think so.
for
I
what
mean, you,
purpose?
you can find both things.
I see. Well, I just think we're 3,000 years later. Shouldn't we be using decimals?
We can, yes. Then it would be easier to align. I mean,
Yeah,
do we use then negative numbers, for example, for West, or do we keep it still W?
I think we still keep it W. That seems useful.
Okay. Yeah,
I mean,
we
that way
can do
you
that.
get a sense of where the thing is,
Hmm.
but I don't think that, I mean, I
Okay.
don't know. Does anybody else have an opinion about this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm not a connoisseur of this. So for me, decimal seems like the only natural thing.
Well,
This is something to get used to.
it seems like a win because it reduces that width too.
I'm
Right.
checking, for example, what my iPhone tells me, and it uses degrees, minutes, and seconds.
Hmm.
Where does it
Well,
tell you that?
Yeah, where?
I have an
Where?
app. I have an app with a compass.
Yeah, okay, right. But that's what the app maker chose to do.
Yes. Yes,
I
that's
mean, I
I
think
have
with
the standard
maps,
compass and it just uses degrees,
okay.
with
southeast.
decimals.
I mean, it's literally just degrees.
No, but it must have a decimal degree.
The Compass app on iOS uses degrees, minutes, seconds.
Well, not mine. It's just degrees.
But as we see, I've seen both used regularly. But yes,
Okay, let's use decimal degrees.
okay. And
So
with
for what it's worth, Google Maps uses decimal.
So does Apple Maps if you put a pin.
Yeah, let's use decimal.
okay,
It's more computational and less Babylonian.
yep. And for example, with 3 decimals, degrees 0.3 decimals.
I would think so. I don't know how many people are typically quoting. How far does that, what length scale does that give you?
Um, I would say we will be talking about hundreds of
195.
meters.
So
It's
3 or
7 on
4.
Google Maps.
Yeah, but that's
Google is
different, right?
using 6 digits.
Total
I don't
or
know how they
after the
came to that
decimal
number.
point? Total or after the decimal point?
After the decimal point.
I'm seeing 7 after my decimal point.
I get 5. Mine's lowest. I
Wonderful.
win.
I think that's too many. So
Yeah, I
3
think so
plus
too.
3, 8, yeah,
Oh,
8 digits.
actually, I bet. I wonder.
Okay, I think it's degrees plus 3 digits. It's fine.
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
not trying to actually give, if you copy paste this thing, presumably, I mean, what the heck does this copy paste? What happens if I copy that?
It may be a raw object. It's there. Nice. It's written.
Okay.
Right. I mean, the one case where you might want more digits, and this is what we do in real columns automatically, but I don't think this is going to happen, is, if they were all, 45 degrees something, then you might want more digits in the minutes
Yes. To display. I
to
agree.
display. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, what we're storing, if you copy paste, you'll get the full digits.
Oh,
But
yeah,
I
we're
agree with
storing
you that
the 53 bits. Yeah.
right. We nice if I mean, so it is the case then that if it is doing some adaptive thing, if you're showing, so for example, if I just say table of 45 plus random real, 0.001, oh, I'm doing table, comma 20, right? Well, that's okay. But if I go a few more of these, it's going to look a bit silly. And you're saying that in the case of Tabular, it's doing a better job there. Can I see that in any way? Can I just do tabular of list that?
Yeah, you should be able to do that. Well, the other direction, but
What's that?
Well,
Yeah.
do map list rather than wrapping in a list.
Okay.
So you get a column.
Right. I mean, and with that
No,
amount
I'm not impressed. I mean, where is all the?
I mean, it doesn't show off an infinite number of digits.
Why can't I resize? What happened to the resizer? Why can't this resize?
I guess because there is no more data to the right.
That UX is not great. Right? In other words, if I pull it out to the right, it's just not clear why it's not getting bigger.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It should work.
Okay.
I consider it a bug.
Okay, but so what was Rob saying about how?
well, Rob was wrong. Sorry.
Okay.
I
Is
mean,
there
what
is
Rob
there
is
some
thinking of
solution?
depends on the depends more on the amount of digits to the left of the decimal place.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So this was not solved. I mean, this would be an interesting thing to solve, but it has not yet been solved.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So if
I
you did
mean,
like,
we
you know,
should-
4.5 plus those numbers instead.
I don't understand. It's not going to help. I mean, look,
Yeah.
it's either going to adaptively, have enough digits or not. I think this would be a nice thing to solve. It is not the highest priority. Pin it as a future issue, I think.
Yep.
Make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
This is just showing extended support through other objects, for example, geoposition XYZ.
Lovely.
And then
So wait a minute. If geoposition of tabular works, is that true?
of tabular column. Well, we can extend it to tabular, but it would have to be consistent in numbers, right?
Yeah, I get it.
The normal form would have to be a list of triples.
Yeah.
So also we can use the tabular column inside geopaths, points. So it will be interpreted as a list of geopositions, as its normal form would be interpreted.
So can you use like we do in Viz, if you have a tabular, can you just extract the column you're interested in?
Not yet.
Okay,
Okay.
that will be a useful thing to have, it seems to me. That you should be able to do this. What should work is geoposition of tabular arrow,
I see.
that long something.
Okay.
That would be the obvious way to make that work.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
That's easy to support.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and this is Brett has added support also in the GeoVis functions.
So this is just a couple of them, using the arrow syntax to pull that
When are we going to
column.
get? Well, I mean, I'm hoping we're going to get georaster and all these things with being able to give a function here. I mean, this is right. This is just a column. But this is nice, obviously. But I'm just asking, when can we get the gridded population density and all that kind of stuff? I'm asking for a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
Roger, do you have a comment on that? I mean, that's sort of what
Yeah,
spatial
we're heading
system
towards
might
that.
have.
Okay, so there is sort of on the import side, but then on the object side, we're going to have to there's a preliminary prototype using image, but we're going to have to build another object, I think.
Yes, I think so.
So,
okay. That all looks very nice. All right. This is cool. That's definitely cool. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's keep going here. So now what are we doing here?
So this is meeting 3, looking at style stuff. It's dialed back a bit because I think
Is
some
this
of the
a simpler thing
aspects.
to look at, by the way?
Hmm?
Is this last thing, the state of connection object, is that a simpler thing to look at?
yes, significantly.
Let's
Okay.
just look at it quickly.
Sounds great.
Okay.
So this is what we started in 14.2. It's been extended to relational databases and maybe some other things. There is now a separate documentation format, kind of like we have format pages, there are connection pages.
So, okay, can I see some?
If you go
Where,
up a bit, there's ref data connection object new.
how do I get to that?
I'll click on data connection object new and then press the dot on DocuTools by get function page. And so the previous data connection object page, we didn't have quite enough connections to split them up. And so it was kind of a lengthy thing here that was trying to explain the differences between authentication or location specifications. And so now data connection object itself is a very thin explanation and how to, so the where of the data and how to connect to it and give your authentication is documented by the connection itself. So the ones that aren't tentative here have a started page.
Mhm.
And so yeah, take a look at S3 and Dropbox. Those are pretty familiar to us and give us some good information. Right, and the goal of this thing is to be very thin. We're going to expand to as many connections as possible. And you just want to get your data. You just want to give your credentials.
Right. So just so I understand the flow here. So I mean, you define a data connection object. The data connection object itself doesn't evaluate to anything particularly. Is that correct? It just sits there.
It's just a reference. Yep.
Okay. When I do import, it might ask me for credentials. Is that correct?
Correct. It might.
Okay.
If you had today's secured build, this might be cooler.
Okay. Well, might not pink.
Yeah, probably won't pink. And we could try a couple pretty cool things. Do you have today's secured build?
I don't know. I just started with the build that I was given there.
Well, that's prototype though, but in master for today, it should
Yeah, I
be a
should
newer
have it.
build. Yeah.
Nick is asking, can Tabular become the first out of a dozen ways to visualize grids to be able to put something custom into its top left corner? Oh, I now parsed the
Yeah. I don't know.
Can I do this import?
Could you open the whole notebook actually?
Uh,
Sorry about that.
okay. Oh, is that?
No, that's even older styling of the geopositions.
Probably because we're in secured and not prototype.
Sorry, what? Okay, am I seeing what I'm supposed to see?
Yeah, so you can run that.
Okay.
Wonderful. I was assured this would work. Do you get the same thing for the next one?
It's
There's also
consistent
the
at least.
question. There's a question about whether or not the data still exists. Maybe try the third example. That's a different data set, but a larger one. Okay, I don't think that you have today's build.
It's possible it.
Yeah, that's yesterday's, so no, these
Okay,
definitely
fine.
won't work.
All right. Okay.
But so what you would see here is that this gigabyte CSV file, it's going to display a progress indicator and then come straight back as a tabular, pretty much as soon as the progress indicator is over.
Great. Well done.
And so
How
you can
about-
go to Kaggle and take any kind of URL, and we do a bunch of URL parsing to turn it into their specification. That second example shows their specification. And if you go to the Kaggle connection page,
Not sure that Kaggle will be my top priority for where to get stuff from, but it's okay. Okay.
well, Kaggle's really cool because it gives us a lot of example data for like, comparisons and competitions. There's a bunch of notebooks on there. that we can do better.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
So whether you just give the URL or the path given as their specification is the second form of location, that's how I document how to specify your data. And then there's always going to be an account setting and authentication section that gives which relevant options are available. And so like
Okay.
Kaggle itself has username/password.
Obviously,
But if you
that's
look at
not literally written because would be capital K and all that kind of stuff there.
so these pages are definitely not cleaned up. We wanted to get the structure approved, and then
Okay.
I'm going to fill these in a whole bunch if the style is something you like.
Well, what's the type of the page?
Ref connection.
Is that how we do things like interpreter pages and things? Is that how they're referred to, or how does that work?
Well, there's like ref service and ref format, and so this is similar to those. And if you go
I
to your
see.
O tab, there's connection under. Maybe you
Database
need to
connection
update
pages.
your. No, it's not database connection pages. You need to update your DocuTools to see it.
Thought it was kept updated. All right.
Yeah, well.
Okay.
There is something for connection pages there, but luckily we can go ahead and just click to them from the guide
Okay. So
page.
let me just understand something here. So
Mhm.
if I use a data connection to like AWS, for example, how much am I always using connection name arrow blah, location arrow blah, 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 blah? Or is there a smaller syntax, or do I not care?
This is essentially the minimal syntax. So like
Okay.
for the thing is that you might have to give specific things to a specific connection. Like this is a great time to look at the Amazon S3 page because it's a little bit different. There is a location
I see a bucket
and
thing.
there's a region and a bucket. And I'm now noticing that I don't have the note in the docs above, but I'll absolutely add that. So this is the page that gives you the additional keys that are specific to the type of connection.
Yeah,
And you'll notice that authentication says account key ID and account secret because it's not a username and password here.
I get it. It's nice.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, looking good. Now, what are we going to get here? What are the other things that we're looking for? So there are
So I think that
the
there are
obvious
That
cloud
page isn't.
services.
two more categories apart from filling this out, which is like multidimensional databases, which is like analytics databases, and APIs. Those are two big categories of things that are missing right now.
And we had some early demos that are in the direction of both of those things. They didn't quite make it for this release because we want to really knock that out of the park. But things like Snowflake, Databricks are going to be easy to pull in just like these other connections.
Okay, good. So, for example, for our internal corporate databases,
Mhm.
does what we have here, is it sufficient to support what we're using for our internal databases?
Yep.
Okay.
We use an analytics database that's just in a relational database. So
Okay. But is there a general relational database here, or do you have to specify the brand?
No, well,
yeah, you have to specify which. I mean, I've looked at some of the internal reporting tools and they pull data from all kinds of databases
Okay, but I'm
and
asking the
combine them.
question for this connection, data connection object,
Mhm.
is it the case that that the data connection object has to know, is it a Postgres database or this or that, or are there generic relational database things that you can use?
You do need to know which type when
Okay,
connecting.
fine.
And
Because
if you
we
click
because
on Postgres, it gives you, again, the kind of more specific information to the database. And there's even one more thing for relational database that there wasn't for the other ones.
okay. And what if I have some kind of what if it's MongoDB or something? Can I connect to that, or does that not make any sense?
So MongoDB makes some sense, but it isn't the top priority because it isn't super tabular specific and it's not
Fair enough.
it's a NoSQL, it's a weirder database. So it's definitely on the list, but a little bit lower.
Okay. And just so I understand, I mean, if I'm reading in, for example, from HTML table or something. That's a completely separate thing. That goes through import of HTML with some import element. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
So this is really for things that are sort of live animals that will stay separately in their cage and where you're merely sucking things out of it, so to speak.
Yes.
Yep.
I mean, that was a kind of weird description, but where
No
the
matter
thing
the
is on
cage.
what's that?
No matter the cage.
Yeah, right. But I mean, but where the thing is sitting on a server and it will stay, the primary data will stay on the server.
Yes.
And you can open up PostgreSQL, and it's a simple example. And yep, because this is a database, we document the types in addition, because that's going to be important there.
And don't we have to say, oh, I see we are saying what the correspondence is here. I thought Postgres had geo types and things as well.
We might not support them, but there's some work going on under the hood related to database stuff in Arrow that I'm helping Carlo with. It's a bit complicated, but it should really improve a lot of this.
Isn't the geo extension to Postgres a separate thing?
maybe
Because
so. Because I mean, we're using it. That's
no,
the
I
point.
know that there is such a thing, but I don't think that I'm just thinking. I vaguely remember that the standard Postgres one isn't. It doesn't have it.
Okay.
You have to get sort of the geo version.
Yes, there is a thing called PostGIS.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's what
fine,
it's called.
fine,
Right.
Fine. All right, looking good. Okay, what do we have to talk about here in this? So, this looks good. I mean, I have no.
This is what we
comment.
started to looking at in 14.2. It's just more fleshed out and more filled in now.
Great.
Just to look. Okay.
Looking nice.
And now that we have the approved documentation structure, I can really fill out details and examples and make this look
Excellent.
presentable.
Excellent. And I'm wondering when the LLMs come through and use this documentation, I'm wondering if there's anything that should be differently set up because, I guess not. I mean, there are examples. If the examples are good for humans, they'll be good for LLMs too. So no comments there. All right, let's dig into the difficult stuff here today.
Right, and I don't know that we'll get into the difficult stuff because the difficult stuff is difficult and we're running out of time. And so a lot of this
we're running out of time that much. We got 25 minutes here, so let's dig in.
Not the time I was talking about.
I see. Okay. Well, let's
right.
go.
So this is iterating on the scaffolding and a little bit more.
Okay. So this is the form we discussed last time of having a fully fleshed out association.
Correct.
So this is again an outside in approach.
Correct.
Okay.
And
which I think is not terrible. I think for very large tabulars, outside in is kind of all there is. Am I making sense?
I mean, I think right. I mean, I think going with that is the larger the tabular, the less specific you're going to do styling. Right. So if you've got a smaller table.
Yeah. I agree.
It makes sense to do all kinds of styling based on this, that, and the other. And
right. The outside in approach takes the tabular and sprays across all rows of a column, blah, blah, blah thing. The inside out approach would have a wrapper around individual, elements of that column saying, make this red and so on.
Correct.
Right. So what we're doing first, perhaps, is the outside in version.
Yes. And probably the inside out, part of it will be potentially, wrappers inside tabular that then get parsed out. And then there's the other approach we discussed of having a function annotate tabular, something along those lines that is able to target things. I mean, that's still not inside out, but
No, I understand that. That's basically that's a I don't know what you call it, but I mean it's a thing which is injecting to the inside. But
Yes.
what we're always saying is just like with quantities and units and so on, everything is floating out to the metadata layer. So everything ends up being outside in. Correct?
Yes.
We don't leave any inside out stuff in the tabular. The tabular has been the raw internal little pink creature inside the giant machine is still just raw data.
Right.
So all of this meta information, like whether it's colored green or not, has floated out to the metadata layer.
Correct.
So in a sense, the outside in is the more native version.
Yes. I think that's correct. That it's
Do
the
other people
ultimate.
agree with that? Like Rob, for example, you agree with? I think
Yeah.
you know that then there's a calculus of annotations that we need to do, which is if the tabular changes from underneath you, what happens to the formatting metadata? Right? So just to be clear, in an inside-out approach, if you added a column, for example, it's pretty obvious that if there's a wrapper on an element in another column, it just moves to the new location of that column. Am I making sense? Everybody
Right.
with me?
You're saying that if the third column, is
If the
blue.
fourth row of the third column was red, okay, and then I do an operation that makes that column, that row, move down 10 rows and move across 3 columns, right? If it was an inside out approach, the wrapper that says style comma red would go with the data.
Yes.
Okay. Whereas in an outside in approach, I am referencing that data element by its position in the tabular. And it is far from obvious, in fact, probably not the case, that the annotation will go with the data. See what I'm saying?
Yes, although we also just said that ultimately it's outside in as the representation.
I understand. So we might want to do something.
Right.
Roger,
So
are you
the
paying? Okay. Roger, do you understand what I'm saying here?
Yeah, but I think it's still subtle. So
It is subtle, but I'm okay. Let's remind ourselves with graphs, okay? The canonical form is I believe what is the canonical form? Is it outside in or inside
it's
out?
outside in. So if you
Okay.
look at the full form of a graph, there are vertex styles, edge styles,
Yeah, okay, I get it. I get it.
vertex
Right.
coordinates.
Okay.
And those are sitting outside.
So when we do an operation on the
The
graph,
core of it is just like an adjacency matrix.
right? When we do an operation on a graph, do we make an attempt to realign the annotations
We
or
do,
not?
but we can't do it 100%. But I think it would actually be good if Charles was here because it took us many rounds.
Maybe we should see if we can invite Charles. Can somebody see
That there
if we
was
can find
certain
Charles?
kind
Carla,
of more
maybe?
structural operations that we
Yeah.
could preserve it, and that's where people really care.
Right. So, okay, so the approach that we've taken successfully in graph is where we can preserve it, we go in sort of after the fact and realign things.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so with that example, it becomes plausible to me that we could do the same thing with tabular.
Right. And I think what we have is an implementation of that.
Okay, well, fine. But I mean, but then in terms of inside out, for this version, is there anything coming in inside out or not?
No.
Okay, well, I think that's fine because I think that the big uses of tabular aren't mostly inside out uses, although many examples we want to build might benefit from inside out. And
right, but if you're importing from a CSV file or something,
yeah, you're not going to have inside out. Right?
Exactly.
Unless you have this injected inside approach, which in a sense is what pattern-based, vertex label or whatever else in graph are doing. See what I'm saying? Pattern specified outside in stuff is like function injection.
Yes.
And arguably that could work the same way here.
But it's a little more subtle here because you actually kind of want to look, well, maybe not subtle, but it's different.
You want to look at the values. You want
Yeah.
to make everything that is so
negative, let's say.
Right. So in the case of graph, it's a little bit the same. Like you might have, nodes with, different kinds of names, and depending on the name, you might want to make it red or not.
Right. But I think that what we haven't built yet for graph, which I meant for us to do, is to look at a bunch of annotations around it. So let's say that you know a bunch of properties around each node. It's a more complex graph. It's not just a pure structure.
Yes.
And then you have a bunch of properties like capacity or something like that. So you want to look at those things and then determine based on that. But we haven't built the mechanism that makes that easy.
Well, annotation value allows you to do that, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it's not. Yes, you can do it. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I don't feel it's sort of made streamlined enough that it's. But definitely it's possible. You can do it. You can do it. You do it separate functions outside, and then you have assembled what you need. You put it back in, and you're good.
Right.
Right. And so coming back in terms of stuff moving, with the content. So in the case of columns, it's very natural generally because you have column keys. And so if you say column apple is red, it is red and it doesn't matter if it moves to the front or the end or wherever. The rows are the more interesting and problematic case because they don't necessarily have unique identifiers.
Indeed.
And so what we have right now is if you have a key column, then you can use row key and it will.
Okay, we're getting into more weeds. Let's deal with the beginning of the jungle, the whatever they're called, the overstory or something, before we get into the weeds.
Okay.
Joel is here, Stephen, in case you need it. Joel is here.
Sorry,
yeah.
Joel.
He said.
Why was it's always lovely to hear from Joel, but why is Joel?
Wasn't Joel the person you requested?
It was Charles. Charles.
Oh, Charles. Oh, sorry, I heard Joel. Sorry.
All right, Joel, you go about your business.
Okay.
He was probably really confused for a moment.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. So let's dig into this. Okay. So the first thing, what is this option name?
So that option is, could be background, it could be item style, it could be
I see.
The normal sets, types of options that grid and table view are accepting.
So all these ones.
Yes.
But now
probably, not all of those are going to be that form, but like image size and.
Okay, but dividers, for example, has the fence post problem. Right? Dividers is in between things. And I don't know how we intend to deal with that.
Yeah, and there's probably a handful of things that.
All right, so look, there are
actually
things
apply to that, full specification.
Okay,
the things
so
that are.
Hold on, we've got in a cell. We've got headers of columns. We've got the famous top left-hand side box that Nick referred to. And then we've got the in-between things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So are we imagining that, for example, background here, we don't have a separate header background. So the background has to be in the background option here, we would be specifying header blah, blah, blah thing is whatever. Is that correct?
We could go that approach.
We can go that approach, or we could have introduced header background. Header background is already a symbol.
Oh, for what? For tables? For table view?
For dataset.
Oh, well, then we should use it.
So are header style, header size, header alignment.
Okay, so we already have those options but that's for the top headers, right? What about the left-hand headers?
So I was thinking we could have this accept the same association that says rows and columns.
Makes sense. Okay. All right, so the naive thing here would be if I say header background arrow yellow, not going to work, but okay.
Right.
If I did that, what's it going to do? Is it going to do that for the things at the top, or what's it going to do?
You would do it for the okay, I'll let certainly the things at the top.
Right. I sure. I mean, we can decide what it should do, but I was thinking it would do what say if it's because if you say background go to light blue, it's essentially equal to set the columns. Well, in this case, it doesn't really matter because all the columns are light blue, all the rows are light blue, give you the same result. But for the headers,
no, but for the headers, it's different, right?
Right.
So then, okay, let's okay. We could deal with multiple things here, right? Let's
Can I make a
imagine
quick suggestion?
Yeah.
In like CSV, when you give a specification for what the header lines is, if you just give a single value, it assumes that you're talking about rows, and then if you want rows and columns, you have to give a list.
Fair enough, but that would be the elided form. But here in the case of header background, okay, so let's just look at this is, for example, for background. That's the form that it could be, right? Item rules is so let me is that the values, rules for the values, or is that rules of the form something like this comma column?
That.
Okay.
Yes.
This. Okay. So then we can imagine yet another thing which says something like value function, which takes a function f applied to values to return the style. Does that make sense? That would deal with if I want every negative value to be red, I would say, if basically what I would say is if hash less than 0, style hash. No, I don't want to say that. I've got to label. No, then what I got to say is then this is red. If hash less than 0, red. Otherwise, none or something.
Yep.
You'd have to say which, ABC column or what.
Right. Is that for every cell in the table? Is it for one particular column or one row? Probably one row is less
No.
interesting.
This is a value function. This is an individual value. Maybe it should better be called item value function.
Right, but what I think what I'm trying to say is that
often you want to look. So here's a typical scenario. You look at in one column or maybe a few.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay, and then when you trigger your condition, you want to highlight the row.
Okay, so then we could have something like, okay, here. Okay, let's try something like this. Item value rules, arrow, blank, comma, col, arrow, this thing here. In other words, we're saying you're giving you're giving the position, right, with the item rule. This is just saying this thing goes to red, right?
Right.
But this is saying for any, we could put all instead of a blank there if we wanted to. Does this make sense? That's then.
I mean, I understand what you're saying. I'm trying to think if there's what sorts of precedents we might have for something like this. I mean, I understand what it is, and it's an interesting thought.
The main precedents we have are in don't independently look at. Yeah, they're not things which go in. This is map at, basically.
Yeah, it's map at crossed with position.
No, it's just map at.
Or does map at take a pattern somehow?
It doesn't, but it probably should. I don't believe it does. Does anybody know?
I don't think it does. I think it's only replace part that takes patterns.
Yeah, right. I think map at should take a pattern. Oh, wait a minute. Well, it takes an all there. So effectively, it does take patterns.
Well,
only all as part of the pattern language.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But so this, I mean, this honestly could be that as well. Or it could be an actual pattern. So that would be my suggestion for the ultimate kind of ultimate control. Seems pretty reasonable to me, and not very hard to implement. Does that make sense to people? Yes. No.
I think it makes sense, but
how do I
don't know what all the ramifications of it would be.
What does it do? I mean, okay, so I have.
It goes and selects this element, and for this element, it then runs this function to determine the background. That's what it's doing.
Well, in which column or the whole row?
I mean, the column is in col.
Here, there. See, that it's like item rules is saying.
Does it do it for just that item?
Yes.
So basically, Roger, that syntax is.
So do we have a row value rules as well?
No, that would be like 5 comma underscore.
We could have a row value rules. We could, and that would take row value rules would take a row specification, row 6 arrow, and then the function here would be something which have hash A and hash C and so on, because it's taking the whole association for the row. And we could have column value rules as well.
I was just going to say, then, what you did is what you started at with item value rules with the function and the pattern is even simpler done with column rules. Because then it's just call goes to function.
Yeah, that's correct. No, wait a second. Column rules doesn't take a function on the right-hand side, does it?
Well, I mean, none of them do right now.
Right, but so an alternative would be to allow the right-hand side to be a function and to magically do something different if it's a function. Right, to magically apply that function to the values.
Mm-hmm.
A pure function.
I mean, like in the case of something like row value rules, I mean, the left-hand side of that rule is going to be all 99% of the time.
Yeah.
Well, in which case, really, you want to do instead just all arrow function then.
No, because because I need a way to say that the backgrounds that are going to be changing are on the every cell in the row where the function, is returning, a color.
No, but I'm saying, look, so long as we have a none, for example, this will be saying all, let's say our keys are ABC, all right? Then this would just say all arrow, if hash A is greater than hash C, red, otherwise none.
What about all here indicates that it's the row that's being highlighted?
I admit that's a problem.
Oh, I thought that all goes to if was on the right-hand side of row values.
No. This was a raw thing. So this is wrong. Yeah, I agree. So, right. So the alternative way of doing that would be to say the row value rules with an all there.
Yeah, and so one version of what I'm suggesting, there may be other better versions, but is because all is what people would do 99% of the time, can we just accept a form that alights the all rule function?
And have row value rules goes to function.
Exactly.
Well, sure we can. But we could also have something that says row value function or something.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I kind of prefer that.
I think it's better, yeah.
I mean, just because I don't like things that have to look at, the head to decide that it's a pure function and it should be applied to things. I like to write functions and tie it to some symbol.
But we could also
I agree with you, Brett. We've made that mistake a couple of times, and yeah, I don't care.
We could also have an item value function. Okay, the row value function is applied to all rows and just has the column hat, the association.
What?
The item value function, in principle, could be applied to the position, which is row, comma, column. See what I'm saying? So it'll be a function that applies to row, comma, column, whereas this applies to a function of the row or sock. Does that make sense?
Right. I want to point out that.
Well, I mean, the item value function also needs the value.
Right. It'll be value position at least.
Yeah, otherwise we shouldn't call it item value function.
Yeah, okay. Right. So this again, this is the row association, which is of values. Whereas this should be the individual item value and then the row and column potentially. Does that make sense?
Yes, I want to point out that currently we have these two things outside of, say, the background options. Right now they are independent. One is called the raw style function. The other is called the item display function.
They're slightly different.
They do almost the same thing. It's even more. For the raw value function, that what you are describing right now, it cannot do what it's already doing outside.
What is the outside function? What is it called?
Raw style function.
That's an option.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
And the thing that what you described that cannot do is how to specify only in the certain column you want to style.
Right. I mean, that's where it got complicated because it was applying to a row and then trying to be able to specify background or foreground or other sorts of things.
Why don't we have an item style function, which we could reuse in a bunch of other places?
Item style function.
I think we could, and I think we probably should. So we have item display function, but it's a different thing. So
What does that do?
So item display function is an existing option to dataset. And it's a thing that could make the number 5 look like 5 stars. It changes what the appearance with
So
the
it's not just a style.
correct.
Yeah, they're decorators.
It's a rendering. It's
yeah.
Well, that's a useful
Whereas
thing to have here, but
yes,
so long as the
yes.
item display function contains the coordinates of the item that it is being asked to display, as well as the value of the item. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Sorry, can you say that again?
So long as it has a second argument which gives the coordinates of the item that it's being asked to display. So you can switch on which column the thing is in.
Right. And item display function does have that.
Okay.
I mean, the current design is exactly like the data set. It also provides the whole tabular because it is possible you are looking, you could use.
Okay, fine. That's good.
Yes.
Okay. So that's for item display function, correct?
Right.
Okay. Now, another issue here. This whole decorator business.
I think the decorators are good, but they're definitely not for 14.3. I think it just
not at this stage, probably.
Yeah.
I think that the killer features is to be able to base things on value, because that creates insight. And we do want eventually to have more elaborate thing, and it shouldn't be that complicated to achieve. It shouldn't have, 5 lines of programming to achieve it.
No, I agree. But I mean, so essentially the idea is the decorator is certainly not a string option. That's never going to fly.
No.
But the decorator is like a highlight or something else. It's something not a background. It's some other form of highlighting.
Yeah, basically. Yep.
Like it could be a raised button or some other funky thing.
Exactly. So, I mean, we have another notebook full of these aspirational examples that we also coded up. And
what about using the appearance option for that? For the thing I just described.
Well, appearance is usually very limited to sort of a few string values, right? You can't.
No, it has cases where it has a whole association of stuff. Okay. All right, let's go back over here.
I mean, like, so since you're very familiar with graph, we have sort of this ultimate extension, which is vertex element function and edge element functions. They allow you to do just about anything. And there's a catalog of them available and stuff. These, I think, that need, and there's sort of,
do you have the right name there? Vertex shape function.
Oh, maybe that's what we call them in the end. Yes.
Okay. They may have gotten renamed at one point.
I think they got renamed. Yeah, shape. They changed it to shape functions. Yeah. That's the ultimate in sort of extensibility in customizing things. And there's a bunch of pre-named ones that are easy to use, but then you can write your own. You can do.
Indeed, I have done so many times.
Very intricately, Stephen has done this.
I'm sure. Okay. But that is like ultimate extensibility.
I know. We should probably look at that again at some point, because I've now written enough vertex shape functions that we should probably look at what kinds of things they have been and whether we can parameterize it better.
Right.
So we should pin that point.
We had a whole collection of them. I don't know where they went. I think we had to take them out, but we have a whole collection of them. We pre-wrote. Oh, there's resource data. I see where it moved. The resource data. You have to call resource data to get vertex shape function.
Why this click to copy isn't the whole thing? It should be the whole thing. That's a bug for documentation. Can you raise that, please?
Yeah.
Is it click to copy, or was it just like a hyperlink to the docs for resource?
They hyperlink the docs rather than the actual resource data object, which is what they should be. It should be the resource data object that they hyperlink. You know what I'm saying? Not just the name, not just the blind name.
Right.
What the heck is it doing?
I don't know. I wonder, is that a hyperlink, the resource data part there, or?
It probably is. Looks like it.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
That's totally messed up. Okay, totally messed up. So can we please get that fixed and make sure that nowhere else in the documentation have we made the same mistake?
Someone
Right,
take a
so
look.
resource data,
mhm.
resource function, we should check.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, I've never found these terribly useful. What I find useful is putting real data into the nodes.
Yeah, I mean, there are all kinds of use cases, but we wanted it to be, sometimes you just want sort of different
It
shapes.
shouldn't have been called vertex shape function. That was a mistake.
Okay,
I mean, because it's a more general thing.
sure.
Okay. Well, let's come back to this. Okay. So row key 5 means that the row 5 of the row 5 is purple. But why couldn't that just say 5 arrow purple?
It could say 5 arrow purple. And that would work as well. The case where we've had some discussion is when it comes back to the moves with the data, type of thing, because
Okay,
outside
we'll
in
come to
is
that in a
the
minute.
storage.
Okay, we'll come to that in a minute.
Yep.
Okay. So item rules we're fine with. Item value rules, does that make sense?
So do you want that, or you want is that replaced by the item value function now?
I think it may be better for now as item value function, I think. But then we would want column
and row
rules.
versions.
Yes, we want. But how do we say which column and row we're dealing with? I mean, in other words, it's item value function, but then here, that would naturally be called row rules function. Right, that's what that would be.
So I think for the raw rules function, like John was saying, you probably 99% of the time you always wanted to scan row by row. The problem is that it's not always you want whole rows to be styled. You want certain column of that row to be styled. So
yes, but then you should be using item value.
But then what is the input though? Because for the raw rules function, you are supplying a tabular row. But for the item value rules, you only supplying the individual value, which is not always useful.
Hold on. Let's get this. Let's write this out again. Okay. So item value function. You are supplying. What is consistent with what we did in data set? Which order?
The value, the
arguments?
position, and the tabular.
Okay. Item value function. Value, position, which is row column, and the whole tabular. Okay. So that's the most drilled in thing.
Yes.
So now what we want here well, you want to read in the whole row, but you only want to style a particular column.
Correct.
I mean, I guess we could do that with something like this, F of row a sock, and then row number, and then tabular.
Yes, that will definitely give you ultimate functionality. Yes.
Is there a column analog of that?
I think, well, I mean, I think, there's certainly a column analog of, I mean, there's a column value function. I don't know that
Well,
I have
this is
immediate
saying
use for wanting to say, the fifth row, the column, does something. But it probably doesn't hurt to support it.
Well, here. This could be column 1, and then you're given F of column list. See what I'm saying?
You mean the tabular column?
Yeah, no, how does that work? Wait a second. Yeah, this is a version of item function where instead of testing for the column number, you're listing out a set of columns that you want to do things with.
Yes. So the supply should be still value.
You're right. Well, it's not obvious to me that item value function shouldn't be able to support a list of column arrow, whatever, because this case is the all case, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think being able to say item value function with that list with column goes to whatever is definitely useful.
Well, this seems like a good place to start. Item value function and row value function being the new things being added.
Sorry, do you mean that the item value functions can be either that or that? Okay,
right.
so
I mean,
combined.
we can distinguish a list from other things.
Yes.
And without hackery, a list can't be a function.
Right.
Okay.
So this will replace the option row style function.
Yes.
Okay.
And those item value function, row value function, etc., are elements of that association within background or item style or
right.
Correct?
Yep. Okay, so that's this case. So now I want to talk about headers and I want to talk about dividers. And then the special nick cell in the top left-hand corner.
I think we should call it the nick cell.
Okay. So header background.
Header background goes to red, I think, is the column headers and whatever that first unnamed column is. The index column, I guess.
By the way, getting rid of those indicators, I don't know, there could be an appearance option for the whole tabular that has just got all kinds of things in it. But one of them would be get rid of those indicators. Because that's, if you're going to publish this in a paper or something, you don't want those indicators there.
That sounds reasonable. Or you could have an appearance option that turned them all on.
Sure, but my whole point is that you can have an appearance option with a lot of detailed stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
The next cell could go there if necessary.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't think we have the ability right now, but you also get cases where the Nick cell gets very custom treatments. Gets a diagonal line or the frame, it's a notch, basically notches out of the frame or whatever.
Right.
Um,
We may want an option for the, what the heck can we call this thing other than the next cell?
Another tally mistake.
What?
No.
Never mind. Just from dataset.
What does it have in dataset? Is it
Nothing. That was the joke.
okay?
I don't think it was an obvious mistake because I don't think we know what to do with it. I mean, we could call it the corner. It must have a name. Somebody must have given that a name sometime, although the name may be very silly.
Everybody has their own version of Nick cell.
Yeah.
Origin. Let's call it the origin.
No, we should call it a corner cell or something. Corner. I mean, what would be we have a header. What is it called? It's called header background. I see. So in that family, it would be corner background. It's a bit weird. We need a name for that. I mean, it's the same thing as the axis crossing point, which we call axis origin, but that's a more.
Why do you think I called it origin?
Mm-hmm.
It's where the rows and the columns start.
Well, if header background is going to have an association, we could have just name it string corner.
If which? If
header background is going to have an association, like background does, that corner could be just corner.
You're right. You're right. Okay. So header background. If I think the default header background should just apply to the columns. In this case. And then we've got columns here, which, the hell, right, so if I say columns red, rows blue, corner yellow, right? Do we all know what that does?
So the column headers are red, the row headers are blue, and the corner is yellow.
Yep. And then column rules will be the obvious thing. Row rules will be the obvious thing. You don't need a corner rules because there's only one corner.
You're no fun.
Well, until we go into VR with multi-dimensional ones of these and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah.
Sometime when the typical human has had an extra 3 eyes added.
I'm signed up for that.
Okay. All right, so this looks reasonable for header background. Do you agree?
I think so.
Okay. And those labelings work fine. Okay, next case. So we're going to ignore corner background. It's not going to be a thing. So the next case is dividers and things like that that have a would have a fence posty thing.
Like spacings as well.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have spacings for tabular. We deliberately chose to omit that.
Okay.
But yes, I think those are the only two things in any sort of table-like mechanism that we have is dividers and spacings. I think, so far as I recall, are the only two.
Okay. We've got these lines here, which are yet different things. And I suggest we put those in the, oh boy, header background, maybe, but nobody's ever going to find them there. So we're choosing background, and then header background is for the headers. But in dividers, we could imagine having a header divider.
It can be header style, which is a little more generic and not so specific to background.
I think we already crossed that bridge and we already have a header background. Do we have a header style?
Yes, we do.
Existing or new?
It's existing.
Indeed.
But that's the styling of the contents, right? So it
Yes.
doesn't go extend all the way out to the edge.
Right.
Correct. But I mean, it should still follow what we're doing for header background.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
With, modulo corner.
Okay. So dividers, you either want all the, you often want some set of columns that are the important columns, then a big divider, then another set of columns, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other case where we're looking at the intermediates, so to speak, in tabular operations?
I mean, that's the only thing I can think of that's intermediate. Well, I mean, correction. It depends on whether, like, the mere presence of the divider is the same option as the style of the divider.
No, but independent, I'm talking about transform columns, all that kind of stuff. Nothing there is intermediate. All of that there is a column or a collection of columns, not the transition between two columns. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, the only thing that you run into there that I can think of is the ways of saying that I want this column to be after that column.
Right, for which we were just doing. How did we do that? We did that by based on the column name. You can say
right. You put in like an anchor column and then the new thing. Right. So you would have a list that would say
so
column
that
A.
suggests that the analogous thing to do here is if we say column rules, that it's always the leftward column arrow, whatever it is. See what I'm saying?
So
See
divider.
In this case here, if you said slug, that is talking about the divider right after slug. So I'm saying dividers, arrow, column rules, arrow, In this particular case, it will be slug arrow thick, for example. Does that make sense?
I think in practice you want the other way.
Why? Why not do it the same way around?
Two reasons. Can you move that front notebook a little bit to the right?
Yeah.
So that would mean that you're specifying that, for subtitle, that you're specifying the divider to the right edge that isn't actually dividing anything and that should be covered by the appearance of, like
Look,
the frame or
you
something.
might want the right, we want to generalize this for grid as well. You might want the right-hand column. You might easily want the outer border to be different.
Mm-hmm.
What about the leftmost border?
Well, I mean, we'd have to say none or something.
Yeah, in the anchor columns, the way you design that was to have, if the creation rules preceded a column, and that was the first one, they went before that anchor column. But there's no obvious precedent that could be used here that's quite like that.
Right. But I think we could do none arrow if we had to. Or left arrow. We got to have some convention, right?
Well, so here's, I'm going to question the premise. If I'm saying that I want like a thick divider somewhere, is that something that I expect that divider to be able to move if the table gets transformed?
Yes. That would be, look, times I've used this, the most common thing is my first two columns are, let's say, I don't know, I and J.
Mm-hmm.
Then I want a thick line, and then I want values X, Y, Z.
Yep.
Okay. It's things like that. Or going down the table, I want some number of rows. And then, in the case of that, the more common thing there is, in the case of rows, is given this set, I want a divider after this set. Not, here's my final element of the set. I just want a divider after, and for example, I can imagine a function which says, once I've dealt with all the negative values, then I want a divider. Listen, guys, I have to go to another meeting here. We got a little bit more to cover here. Why don't you guys think through what we've already talked about here? With respect to the, carry things around, I think you should look at whether there is a plausible way we can do that with transform columns and all that kind of thing. I believe some of these things, like insert columns, should be able to handle these things. Transform columns, it's much less obvious what's going to happen.
Right. I mean, we have a mechanism in place for if you're reordering data.
Okay.
If you're doing things beyond reordering, then
mostly all bets are off. But I think with some of those things, if you look, transform columns that you didn't touch in the transformation shouldn't lose their metadata.
I think that sounds reasonable.
If you touched it, in other words, if I yeah, I got to go to my other meeting, but so we may need one more of these. But why don't you think through this first? Does that make sense to people? Yes?
Yep.
Okay, good stuff. All right.
Okay.
Thanks.